Hello, this is Alex Dyer. I'm the Canon of the Ordinary for the Episcopal Church in Colorado, and we're here with another Canon Conversation. And today we are having an ongoing conversation about what it's like to do and be church in the age of COVID-19. And today we are talking about the Disaster Relief Cycle, here with two wonderful people who I will let introduce yourselves. Laura, do you want to start off?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lura Steele. I work with Episcopal Relief Development's U.S. disaster team. I'm also a Denver resident and parishioner at St. John's Cathedral. And with me today is Canon Carl.
I'm Canon Carl Andrews, Director of Disaster Response for the Diocese of Colorado, also a partner in Response and Resilience from Episcopal Relief and Development. And once upon a time, I was Canon to the Ordinary for the Diocese of Colorado, now retired, and have accumulated some 32 years in the military and enjoyed a numerous number of disasters. Likewise, so is my colleague, Laura.
And Carl, I have to say, I think you are failing at retirement. You're not doing a very good job at it, since it's contributed in many ways.
Well, I'm working on it.
We thank you for all the wonderful stuff you've done even before this, and especially during this incredible pandemic. Carl and I talk on pretty much almost a daily basis. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. For those of you who aren't familiar, Episcopal Relief Development is a wonderful organization that not only works domestically, but internationally with crises across and doing the great work of the church and being the body of Christ throughout the world. And we give thanks for all the wonderful work that they are doing. And have been a great resource to us, especially to canons and bishops across the Episcopal Church. In fact, they're with us with the presiding bishop on a call every Monday where we get together for 30 minutes. And it's really 30 minutes. Church meetings can happen within 30 minutes, and that has been proven. And it's great to see that we get updates on that. And one of the things we talked about last Monday was this ongoing emotional disaster life cycle and what that looks like, especially with everything that's going on now on top of that. Other parts of the country are dealing with hurricanes. We in Colorado will probably soon be dealing with some more fires, what that's going to look like, as well as the riots going across the country, especially those in Denver. Everything, this disaster upon disaster, and it's caused, I think, ERD and other people to look at things very differently. So I kind of wanted to bring that to people here in Colorado and see if we can have a little conversation about that, because I've heard that from some leaders recently and everything that goes on. So impart your wisdom to us, Laura and Carl.
Well, one of the early slides that is available on the screen shortly being shared is the disaster life cycle. And one of the deceptive things about our thinking of disasters is we think that we'll be able to finish one before we get hit by another. The truth of the matter is that's not normally the case. You'll be already currently involved in one before the next rolls in. In this particular case, we're probably dealing with three right now, and that is in Colorado, the first of which is the ongoing pandemic. Two, that secondary portion of the pandemic is that there'll most likely be a surge in the near future. As it's related, we've also facing the situation of the riots within Denver. Mm-hmm. And then the one that probably has got most Coloradoans most concerned is the anticipation for fires. Followed frequently on the heels for fires in Colorado is floods, because we've had a heavy snowfall this year and rain, so the drought portion of it has been relieved for us. Laura, do you want to take us through disaster life cycle?
Yeah. One of the things that is particularly challenging about these sort of concurrent disasters is you don't have time to pause and refill your tank and sort of brace yourself for what's coming next. I know for me, I wake up feeling tired. I get a little frazzled. Like I'm sometimes have trouble like finding my words and finding my keys. Like just the way that your body functions under prolonged stress and adrenaline, everything starts to get really messed up. Mm-hmm. And if you are starting out here, if your average baseline is sort of middle of my Zoom screen, and then a disaster happens. There's a pandemic that causes a lot of people distress and heartache, and we've seen that in the job losses, we've seen that in the illness itself, and just disruption across the board. And then if you layer on top that protests that are causing additional disruption, additional distress, unrest, if you're layering on top of that racialized violence, that is an additional trauma that drains people. And it's hard to have the energy to take the necessary precautions to prepare and to attend to people who are hurting. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is maintaining your energy to do the work, both preparedness and the concurrent disaster response.
So how do we keep from rocking in the corner? I mean, it almost seems overwhelming, I think, of all this type of thing. And you said the adrenaline and, keeps going. And I think your colleague Katie talked about, it's great if you're running from a bear, but over prolonged periods of time, it is exhaustive. So what would be your advice to leaders?
Well, I'm going to put it in a different context, which was the first time I learned the need for R&R, or rest and relaxation. If you're dumped into a combat situation like I was for about 13 months, if there isn't a way that you can corner or find a corner so that you can have rest and relaxation, one of the best ways to start some of our rest and relaxation is to limit the amount that we're on either, the news or turning on the TV or whatever the nature is, because after you've seen mile after mile after mile of footage, your brain just sort of turns to mush and you can't even think, what is it I should be doing? One additional piece to that is, in addition to turning off the computer, putting boundaries around the amount of energy that you are going to give to the current situation, that there better be a healthy prayer life. One of the gifts that I see repetitively within parish life, in this context of people doing everything by Zoom, is a number of Bible studies that have started to flourish in parishes, in addition to their Sunday worship. So there needs to be some very clear guidelines, some very clear time frames for rest, and there needs to be some very clear time frames in terms of healthy prayer life to be able to sustain the energy level so that we can go forward.
Absolutely agree. I think the thing that I would add is, which Carl touched on, your normal self-care practices might not work. They might not be accessible. If you are someone that always hits the gym or always likes to be around people, like there are specific guidelines that are prohibiting that right now. And experimentation and being gentle with your self-care practices is really helpful. I find that doing less, looking for things that I can do less of versus adding new things is helpful for me. And then I think defining concrete small steps to take, it's psychologically helpful for me. Like if I get one little checkbox done that pushes me 2% forward towards whatever my goal, my task, my whatever is, that's really helpful. I can't, it's very hard for me to zoom out and solve everything right now. So just really small, actionable things that you can do to help people prepare, help people grieve, help people during this time with whatever they're dealing with, whether it be job loss, whether it be something else. All of that's incredibly helpful. Yeah. And might make you feel better too.
Well, I try to encourage people, in my sense, and this reminder myself too as well, the grace and space that we need, with things. I think we need to forgive ourselves and to allow ourselves, because I think that there's a lot of, myself included, wanting to do this over-functioning type of thing and solving things and being this, and and I think the urgency of really trying to want to even push through this crisis to get back to something thinking that we have more control over it than what we actually do. It's an illusion I sometimes have to remind myself of from time to time. For those of people who aren't familiar with the disaster lifecycle, I don't know if you have that available, Laura, but just to kind of see the grid of what that kind of looks like, because I think that's telling to people. I've worked with a couple of leaders around that, and it's been very kind of like, oh, yes, that is me. And where we're at, and realizing too, I mean, before stage two, that there's not linear. You don't necessarily move from one thing to one thing to one thing, and then, you never go back to that. But how do you think that's playing out, from what you're seeing, and Carl as well, disaster life cycle here?
So the image that's on the screen right now is, it looks like a little heartbeat monitor. At the beginning of a disaster, there's a dip, it's scary, but then that adrenaline kicks in and people report a strong sense of social cohesion, lots of creativity, lots of energy, and that fades rapidly is what you see. And because of the profound sort of length of impact of the virus itself and the economic impacts that the social distancing, life-saving social distancing measures are creating, people stay in that trough for a long period of time. And then over time, people will normalize or stabilize rather, and find a new baseline. And that might be completely unrelated to what happened before the disaster. And I think the thing to note with this is the trough is longer. And if we are sort of right where my mouse is at impact, when a fire happens or when there's another video of police violence popping up in your news feed, you don't start back from your pre-disaster level. You start from something lower. And sort of a quick sketch visualization is you can have those different peaks and valleys, but you're starting from lower and lower places of emotional resilience.
And to add to the complications of the disaster life cycle, you have to impose directly on it everything every one of us knows from Kubler-Ross's Death and Dying, which goes on simultaneously. And so you almost get this circular swirl that hits you as you're working, as clearly pointed out, working through grief may suddenly flip you back to the beginning stages of bargaining or something of this nature, or it isn't true, which then reinforces the disillusionment phase of things. So that's one of the horrors, I think, in the pandemic portion of it, is the disillusionment is such a long, 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 nasty drop and curve.
So what's challenging about that is the specific complications that the virus poses for both the protests, but the civil change that everyone's trying to affect, and the pending fire season, is that everyone's tired. No one has the bandwidth to sort of think about what's going on. Lots of local resources and supply chains are already sort of stretched thin in weird ways. If folks were nervous about evacuating before, maybe they were reluctant to leave their property if there was a wildfire in the area. Now it's going to be additionally challenging because there's an additional layer of safety that people are worried about leaving their home, or the financial implications of leaving their home, potentially exposing themselves to a virus and exposing themselves to incur additional financial expenses that they don't necessarily have. It can be difficult to stock up on supplies. If you are someone with asthma, if you're someone with respiratory illnesses and you like to wear a mask when smoke gets really bad, it's going to be difficult to find those now. So those are things that if you have the bandwidth in a moment to sort of think through, especially as a congregational leader, you like sort of know who your elders, who your vulnerable people are in your community who may just need a little bit more assistance thinking through their plan for the summer. That accompaniment, when it's the accompaniment, the community, the relationships is resilience building. So it kind of hoops that little line up a bit. And on top of that, you're equipping people with the tools they need to stay safe for whatever comes up for them.
And I think the challenge as a congregational leader too, it's not just your own anxiety and everything else too, it's everyone else's that you're kind of absorbing as well as a part of that too, and realizing that people are at different stages and trying to check in on all that. And you kind of mentioned as well the kind of thinking of ahead to the summer. So is it possible, right, to build a disaster plan when you're in the middle of a disaster? Is that something you can do? Or, because I know, I mean, when I was a parish leader, full confession, like, we didn't have a disaster preparedness. It was always those things that kind of got bumped down the list type of thing. And some of them did, some of them didn't. But even the reality, I think very few people planned for a pandemic and then something on top of that. If you did do that, God bless you. I want to hang out with you more. But most people did not. So can you build upon, if you're into the middle of disaster, is it still possible to think about that, another disaster prepared plan?
Yes. As a matter of fact, if you don't, you're going to get caught more than off guard, and your depression and your inability to assist in the situation will be more dynamic. If I was to pick on the western slope of Colorado right now, they're already talking with each other in terms of what is it going to be like with our fears and concerns for fire. Mm-hmm. And if I then move to a particular mountain community, which only has one way in and one way out, which has tremendous snowfall, they're already having the serious conversation both within the church and within community leaders, because it's a small mountain community, of A, how do we get out of town if there's a flood, and B, who's got the sandbags? Mm. So there needs to be, regardless, we have experienced enough of those two types of disasters that those conversations at least reside historically in our minds, so that can give us part of the energy so that we can talk with our neighbors saying, well, let's not just talk about it. Well, what do you think we ought to do? That kind of action. Yeah.
I think a lot of people get freaked out by the word plan. They think like a binder with a lot of technical terms. Our organizational disaster preparedness plan for Episcopal Relief and Development, an organization that does disaster preparedness, is stay safe, communicate with your supervisor when you can, continue to stay safe, and repeat. Just knowing the first couple of steps, just having a what if conversation. What if there is a fire? You could do that in a coffee hour after church one day with your vestry, with your church leaders, with whomever you want to have in the conversation. And that just, even that conversation, even if nothing's written, will help. And then you get points if you can take notes, and then you get even more points if you can think it through. Great. But something is way, way better than nothing.
Well, anything else you guys want to add in a sense of speaking to leaders across the Episcopal Church in Colorado?
Yes, actually. I'm pretty much a high energy person. And one of the theme songs within Episcopal Relief and Development right now, to assist collectively the community, is the motto of aim low. In other words, we all have these great, wonderful, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. And as Lura said a little earlier, getting one or two small things done in the aim low category then gives yourself that gentleness so that you have additional resilience so that you can actually plan for what could happen.
Yeah, I think priests in particular, someone wants a diagram around community organizing. There's, one top line going up as the world as it should be, and then the bottom baseline is the world as it is. And we like to dwell a lot of times, not every colleague, but a lot of my colleagues need even to dwell in the world as it should be. So we overfunction, we try to do things, and sometimes we just need to do with the reality of the way things are. And that. So, Laura, you have something to add?
Yeah, I think as long as you're reaching out to folks, particularly folks who may fall through the cracks of other recovery systems, other service providers, reach out to those folks, take care of them. I love you guys. You're doing such a great job. I know preaching to your iPhone isn't fun.
No, that's what I hear. But I think there's also one of the blessings around this is people, I think, are more connected in some ways than they previously were, just showing up on Sunday. I think people have been checking in. So there are some good things, I think, that will hopefully we will continue in the future. And if, God forbid, there is another crisis that immediately happens, we'll be able to respond in a different way. Well, thank you all. This conversation, as in most of my Canon conversations, could continue on for probably another hour. But ERD will continue, Episcopal Relief and Development will continue to provide resources around that. We will continue to provide and to do as we figure out what this new landscape looks like and how to deal with it better. But I think, as we stay connected and learn together about how to meet the challenges ahead. And I am thankful, I just want to say that for both of you, and that you're both in Colorado is huge. And we will, I'm sure, continue to have conversations. Carl, I know I'm going to continue to have conversations with you. So I feel sorry for you.
Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you again. Take care.